It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey Not the Face with your host John Nash and your producer me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to talk about new updates in the UFC antitrust cases. We're going to talk about the White House card once again and the UFC's self-reported global views and social media views. We're going to talk about Alex Pereira and Floyd Mayweather and Dana White. We have so many things to talk about. But before we get into all of those things, I'm going to recommend that you pick up a paid subscription because OG listeners know that we split every episode into two parts. We basically break it in half, and the first half is free, but the second half we always put behind a paywall. So if you want to listen to the whole episode, you're going to want to pony up a few bucks to pick up a paid subscription. And as a bonus, you're helping us keep the lights on around here. So we thank you for that. Now, John, how the heck are you?
Little ragged, running a little ragged. Still got one more week left in the great state of Minnesota. A little humid, and my mom's beating the crap out of me. So I got that to look forward to for my last week. So yeah. Besides that, it's great.
Is your mom beating the crap out of you as much as Turkey Al-Sheikh thinks he's beating the crap out of reporters?
Probably more. I think my mom's she can kick the crap out of a lot of people, especially just her ability to drag it into the deep rounds when you're exhausted, can't keep going.
Your sweet mother is awesome. What are you talking about?
No, she's great. I love my mom, except she just, she can be a chore. Let's just put it that way.
She's a handful. So, that's all.
She's a handful. She is. I will not bore you and the listeners with all the details of my day, but yeah, it's been a handful the last couple of days. So,
well, let me ask you this. There's a feud going on right here between Everything Boxing, aka Darshan Desai, and Turkey Al-Sheikh. And something caught my attention on here when Turkey talked about how much Saudi owns of Zuffa Boxing and him being the chairman of the board. This all boils down to the summit, if you will, the summit that was held and between the boxing heads of Matchroom, Queensberry, Gold Star, and DAZN. And I guess Dana White was supposed to be there and Nick Khan, and I believe Nick Khan did show up because Turkey made a separate tweet with a photo with Nick Khan. But Dana was very conspicuously absent, and Eddie Hearn, for all his bluster, was certainly there with bells on, as I predicted. I got to get your take on this, though, because I'm highly amused right now.
Yeah, I'm not quite certain what my take is because the information is limited. My question would be, did Nick Khan meet with the other promoters? Was he there with the other heads, or did he come, wandering in late, and then they had a photo op separately? Did he intentionally withhold himself? Did some come up and he have to leave the room perhaps, and that's why he wasn't in the photo and they took one later? Or did he intentionally excuse himself, I should say, from the photo? I mean, that's all my questions there, because they each tell us something different, which is kind of strange too, because I don't think most fans would make that big a deal about Nick Khan appearing with these other promoters, entities in boxing, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't send a signal to the typical casual fan, like, oh, they're working together. Oh, Zuffa Boxing's giving up their model. Things like that. I don't think it would. It wouldn't mean much in that direction. The signal. We all become criminologists Kremlinologists, I should say. Remember when people used to look at photos of the Kremlin, the Soviet Politburo and the leadership of the Kremlin to figure out what was going on in the Soviet Union. And now we're doing the same with photos of boxing promoters, because we're trying to think, who's closer? Who does Turkey look friendlier with? Who's there? Who's not? And so part of me is wondering, like, well, did Zuffa Boxing figures intentionally stay away from this because they didn't want to be seen in a photo for whatever reason? But part of me says, why would they care about that? Because whatever signal it sends, it's only to a small group of people on social media and hardcore fans that follow this shit. It doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't mean you're really committed to anything. But at the same time, they do seem preoccupied sometimes with how that small group of people think. So there's a lot of information out there, a lot of more details I'd like to get. It's hard to tell what's going on. I would just guess, based on the fact that Nick Khan didn't appear with the others and that he did get a separate tweet by Turki Al-Sheikh, who did claim, though, he is the chairman of the board of Zuffa Boxing, that no one tells him to delete anything, that they own, being the Saudis, 60% of Zuffa Boxing. I would like some clarification, though. Is that currently 60%, or is that the maximum amount Zuffa or TKO can get of Zuffa Boxing? Because as we reported, there's a couple times we've heard in the past that 60-40 was going to be the split, but then it was suggested, I believe, in one of the earnings calls or in one of the SEC filings that perhaps it could get up to 50%, but that would be the UFC hitting all their benchmarks. So it'd be nice to know for sure what the maximum amount TKO can get of Zuffa Boxing. But right now, he made it clear that they own 60% to the 40%. No one tells him what to do. So that would suggest that he did not retweet the list of people he's meeting with and exclude Zuffa from it, just because Zuffa asked him to, Zuffa Boxing, because they didn't want to be connected to him. But again, none of that, I don't understand. It just shows you how strangely, petty these people are, that they worry about this, because the typical fan, the typical person in boxing, not the online nerds like us, not the media that goes nuts for this, the typical person wouldn't even notice or care that they all met. What they want to know is, are you actually going to make the fights? Are these going to happen? That's, and I think that'll be the litmus test we should go on. Is there a detente in boxing? Do we have some sort of peace here? As the Yalta Accords been signed here for boxing, and we will know that when they, when some big fights start happening as co-promotion between these promoters. But till then, it's entertaining drama. It's, again, something we can kind of watch, but I don't know what it really means.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I just thought it was funny, and that Turkey can be very, very petty. I'm not denying you that. It was entertaining. It was amusing. The reaction, the fact that he found someone that tweeted it and made a huge deal about it, instead of just ignoring it on his life, is pretty indicative of who we're dealing with here, I think. No doubt, because the person didn't quote him directly. He took screenshots. So, I mean, come on. What the hell is going on there? But I'll tell you what was more.
Sorry, I don't interrupt. We should give a shot. It's the account, Everything Boxing, too, who has 44,000 followers. This is not a multi-million massive account.
Right.
44,000 is pretty good in combat sports space. But the fact that, again, he go out and reply to this, it says a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Everything Boxing is hooked up to Ariel's vertical, though.
Uncrowned, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe there's a slight bit of acrimoniousness on Turkey's part, because I know he and Ariel are at odds now. So I just found it very funny. But what was more entertaining to me was the fact that I am growing zucchini in my yard that looks like little baby watermelons.
She won't leave me alone about this, people. She keeps sending me photos. Wants me to show my mom.
They're gigantic, aren't they? They're pretty big. Yeah. They're like those little small watermelons.
I know nothing. I'll send the photos to my girlfriend, but I know nothing about gardening. I don't know how big they're supposed to be. I know nothing.
You know what a zucchini looks like? It's supposed to be like a cucumber. It's not supposed to look like a watermelon.
Well, I got zucchini envy over here because I just can't. So I can't put up with
You
that
know
kind
what
of
I do? I
size.
could depend on you for something funny out of that.
Yeah.
I've got zucchini envy. That's funny. Oh my goodness. Oh gosh. I gotta get us rolling, but that was the best. Okay, that was way more entertaining than this stupid turkey a la chic beef. Oh my goodness. Zucchini envy. I'm gonna title the show Zucchini Envy.
As long as it makes you happy. That's fine.
Oh, goodness gracious. All right. I do got to get us back on track. And there was a status conference, a hearing, whatever you want to call it. Is it a hearing or status conference? Which was
It's actually first of 3 days of hearings. Actually.
Hearing. Okay. So we did have the first of the 3 days of the hearings today. I believe Ari Emanuel was the most important piece of the puzzle. So my question is, as it always is, are there any new updates in this UFC antitrust case?
Well, there is. Their case, we have a filing, and the filing actually is minutes of the court that kind of summarizes today's hearing. And I also talked to, I contacted some of the attorneys that were there. I contacted our roving reporter, our field reporter, Alessandro Gelke, who was there to give an update of what happened. They gave me a summary, but just to go first by the minutes of the proceedings, it was a spoliation hearing. And today they had Mick Maynard. I believe tomorrow they'll have the expert Wedden.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sean Shelby comes in Thursday, and there might be a few other people in. So today it started with Mick Maynard. The court, they started the day at 9:45. It's nice to roll into work at 9:45 a.m. And so then they had Mick Maynard take the stand. It's good. They gave us the exact time, 9:52 a.m. I feel like I'm on Law and Order here now as we're talking about this.
Wait, what happened to Ari? I thought Ari Emanuel was supposed to be a part of this.
No, he could not make it. He has been moved to July because he was supposed to originally come. Him and Mark Shapiro were going to come immediately after UFC Freedom 250. So we have to wait till a couple more weeks before they come in. I can't remember the exact date, but it's only a couple weeks away. So Mick Maynard came in with the title of Senior Vice President of Talent Relations. So he was called forward, sworn in. The judge questioned him for over almost an hour. They took a brief break, and then he came in. He was examined, direct examination by the plaintiff's attorney, Michael Delangelo, who we've had on the show before, and that was over an hour. Then they took another recess, and then they continued examinations with a bunch of exhibits that were offered to the court that have not been posted on Pacer yet. So hopefully they will. If not, they might have been sealed, in which case I hope Alessandro Gelke took notes like, he's supposed to, because that's what I would do. I would sit and sketch out all the stuff that was on the that was projected to make sure we had it. And so that was his big day. Now, what did they talk about? What happened? Well, my understanding is the plaintiffs were pretty happy with the results today. I don't have all the details, but what Maynard testified, one thing he said that in 10 years, he has never asked about an arbitration clause, right? So the arbitration clause was completely unknown to him, apparently. The only thing, and it's something that was new, introduced to, strangely enough, knowing how many managers and how many fighters were apparently unaware when they put it into the contracts, that is a sad fact right there, I think, is the vast number. I'm not sure how many Francis Ngannou's there were that actually looked through it and saw this, or Paulo Costa, I'm sure we'll talk about later, because he's one of the other people that paid attention to that. But then the only thing Maynard said he negotiates is pay and number of fights. And then he also said that what he did is he discusses with the fighters is like I said, the pay, the purse, the number of fights. But when they get big, like their top 10 or top 5, then Hunter Campbell takes over. He hands them over to Hunter Campbell, which is the job Dana White, the friends of Fertitta used to have for some of the higher end fighters, or I guess Joe Silva kept for some of them as well when he was still there. Now, Gelke also tweeted a post afterwards. It kind of summed up some of the stuff. And he noted, this is what I've heard from others, it was a very good day for the plaintiffs in the UFC antitrust hearing. Mick Maynard was on the stand. Plaintiff showed evidence Maynard was clearly deleting text while under litigation hold. When the defendants questioned Maynard, the judge, sorry, I had to pause because the way he phrased this, the judge reamed them for leading repeatedly. And so by all accounts, I heard that sums up what some other people told me who were there, is that he was getting grilled repeatedly that, you do know you're under litigation hold, you do know you're not supposed to delete anything, and then he deleted stuff repeatedly. And then the judge seemed pretty perturbed or annoyed with the defendant's attorneys when they were questioning him. So that was the big name day for Maynard. And again, it's a small slice of information we have now, the evidence, but it just seems to be stacking up the idea that the plaintiff, the defendants, I should say, were just, I don't want to say that their handling of the material that they're supposed to be, under litigation preserving, was at best very poorly handled, right? Because they lost a ton of it. And at worst is just an example of just obvious intentional spoliation, destruction of evidence, basically. And so that the fact and what's amazing is this keeps dragging out when you compare this to the WWE case, but the UFC case, this keeps going. The judge, I thought when Dana White testified and Tracy Long and Hunter Campbell was called in, I thought it'd be done. And yet then next he goes, the other matchmakers have to be called in that have lost stuff. The executives over TKO have to be called in. And he has a judge brought in to go over the material, who's an expert in digital preservation and spoliation. He has a digital expert that's called in to examine all the material from the phones. So he is being extremely thorough, and for the last year, it's been pretty obvious. He's been giving the defendants every opportunity to explain themselves on this, and I don't think they've done a very adequate job of explaining why this material is missing. And they've now come forward, as we talked about previously. They have all the managers sent in declarations saying that that their negotiations weren't with Dana White or whatever. But we don't have any. Apparently, we don't have very little or almost any of the negotiations between them and Shelby Maynard, any of the figures that work at TKO. And none of those managers have handed over material either. So, I can only imagine, again, now this is me putting on my own analysis cap. I have to somewhat assume that Judge Bullard and the defendants and plaintiffs all know that they have massively fucked up and destroyed tons of evidence. Mm-hmm. And that the judge has been giving them every opportunity because he wants this case to move forward, and because his decision is going to be so important to the case, because this could impact all three of the suits that are going on. Actually, four, if we want to add in the suit involving the fans. The fans, though, I got to be honest, I've not really closely followed that one, so I'm not sure what details are important to them. But the other three UFC fighter cases, the Johnson v. Zuffa, the Serkinov v. Zuffa, the Davis v. Zuffa, all that evidence, that material is important to each of them because it applies to them. Did the UFC grossly abuse monopoly power, grossly abuse their market power, grossly violate Nevada law, and force these arbitration agreements on fighters? Well, one way to know is to know what the negotiations were. We don't have the negotiations, it seems. It seems like they've been deleted. That impacts Serkinov. Does this impact the entire industry? And questions like that. Well, that's another question. Do we know anything about the details of its impact on the industry, on the ability of fighters to negotiate outside the UFC? Well, that's another thing we'd want some discovery about, and we have none. So that impacts Davis, which is a bench trial. The judge decides that, not a jury. And then finally, the Johnson, the key one. Well, if Serkinov is decided by the judge on an order, then those fighters who have signed arbitration agreements are included in Johnson. And then on top of it, Johnson wants all this material to create their models to show that the UFC has been abused monopoly power to go through. I mean, they could probably do some models just on the numbers, but they want this material to show to demonstrate that the UFC is engaged in abusing their market power, engaged in monopoly power, abuses. Well, we don't have that. So all three of those cases could potentially be impacted, and the judge has given them every opportunity. And so I've said it before, it almost seems like, and there still is a chance that because of, base, and this is not coming from me, I think Judge Boulware brought this up. Someone pointed this out to me, and the plaintiffs' attorneys have brought this up to me, that some of those Supreme Court rulings still could fuck with this case, even with everything seeming to go in the plaintiff's way. But I just have to assume he's been giving them as much rope as possible, and TKO and the UFC just seem intent on just hanging themselves. That's just my non-legal authority opinion, but that's just the read I have of this so far.
Yeah, it seems pretty bad. And I'm going to make a very, very opinionated thing here. I am going to point at Mick Maynard and say, liar, liar, pants on fire. I don't know any of the details. I had no idea about the arbitration agreements in the contracts that I am presenting to fighters. Come on. I don't believe you, man. John, do you believe him?
He said he didn't.
Oh, come on.
He said he didn't. But
he also is willfully deleting text messages that he was ordered not to delete.
Yeah, but see, that's where the mistake is. He deleted all the text messages he was sent about the arbitration agreements, and that way he forgot. He's like, shit, I didn't realize that's what those were about. I thought it was spam or something.
Yeah. John, you stop it, okay? Stop it. Mick Maynard's a liar. Pants on fire. That's all I'm not say.
I'm not going that far to call him a liar. But
I am. I will. This is my personal opinion. I am opining on the fact that Mick Maynard willfully deleted text messages that he was ordered not to delete, and then went so far as to say that the contracts that he negotiates, he doesn't know what's inside them. I am calling you a liar, sir. Now, that is just my opinion, and we must move on. We will keep you updated on the next 2 days of these antitrust case hearings, though. Bet your bottom dollar. But we must move on. So, John, listen. The UFC self-reported 34 million global views of the White House card, which I have no problem buying into. I really don't. But what was so funny is that they also self-reported 126 billion, with a B, social media views for the White House card. Smoogie made me laugh so hard and said that every single person on earth made a post or clicked on a post about the White House card at least 15 times, and that made me laugh so hard because 126 billion social media views for the White House card. Do you believe those estimates?
I do, because you have to read what the actual estimates are. And that's the interesting thing. And it's hilarious because I saw some other members of the MMA media discussing this, putting up their opinion that, these numbers were kind of bogus, or comparing it to, let's say, MVP. And there's just a class of fans that are very passionate about defending TKO boxing. And I shouldn't say TKO boxing, UFC, the TKO properties, but UFC in particular, no matter what. And to be fair, there are those that are always interested in attacking UFC no matter what. They cannot credit them when they have some success. They have to pretend the company's going to fall apart any day, because I cannot believe that anybody actually likes this and that they're successful. But there are those that have to rush their defense, and they were bragging about how this proves it did twice as much as the MVP card with Carano versus Rousey. And what got me is none of the numbers are comparable. None of them. The UFC Freedom 250 card, they said that their live audience across two markets was 8.2 million live audience. That's 7 million. That's people watching live at one time. 7 million in the US, 1.2 in Latin America. So their total unique viewers who watched at least 1 million in those two territories, they said, was 17 million.
You mean watched at least 1 minute?
Yeah, that watched at least 1 minute. Total unique viewers was 17 million of those two territories. So 15.3 million in the US, 1.7 million in Latin America. But then they have their global viewers. So they added viewership from the UK on TNT, India, which is Sony 10, I believe it is, China, Magoo, South Korea on CJENM, in Australia, New Zealand, plus UFC Fight Pass and residential commercial pay-per-view buys in select markets. The UFC announced an estimated 34 million total global viewers. And this is worth highlighting. The release notes a portion of the international figures is modeled on historical performance of comparable UFC events in markets where direct data was unavailable. So Spain and France, which both had, the top of the card had guys from Spain and France, do not report their viewership data until mid-July or later. So that also means that there could be millions upon millions more who were not included in that figure. And so the UFC, when all these people were starting, I saw posting tweets and stuff and articles posting that the UFC was the most watched MMA event in history. No, it's not even the most watched UFC event, because as the UFC noted in the press release, it was one of the most watched events in UFC history. And so, it's worth noting again that the global 34 million figure combines hard data from a handful of broadcast partners with model estimates for much of the rest of the world. And the press, give the UFC credit, their press release was pretty explicit about this, but I noticed a lot of the coverage kind of glossed over that. Now compare that to MVP, their MMA number one, Rousey versus Carano. Okay, that triple main event averaged 12.4 million viewers globally on a live plus one basis. So right now we are at a different metric than what we saw with the UFC. They had a live and then they had a global number, but their global number, it has no information basically when it was collected. It was actually collected, some of them seemingly up to like a week to 10 days afterwards, some, closer. Each of them has a different metric. They use a different method, all their partners and the Paramount. And so that was a longer duration when they came up with the global. It was not like that and the next day, like we saw with Netflix, but Netflix also didn't give us an actual live amount, it didn't seem like. And their peaked amount that was watched event, they did give us at 17 million, but we had no peak amount from the UFC event. So we had nothing really to compare. The triple main event, I should say, on Netflix averaged I screwed up a little bit. They did give us that 9.3 million. And so they also in the US that peaked at 11.6 million. So we have those numbers. So 11.6 the US peaking live and then 17 million worldwide. And so the event, they said, generated over 410 million impressions across MVP's social channels. So that's a lot. So the comparison, this is where it gets all weird and stuff. And this is why I find it so amusing, is that the UFC Freedom, the average minute audience they use is in America, they use a Nielsen average minute audience. So it's who's watching for at least 1 minute. The global figures described as total global audience, which is sourced from an aggregate of internal and external data, as I said. And it's cumulative, where, so it's cumulative in the sense that they're totaling up the total number of viewers over a 7 to 10 day period. So you add those together. One, we have no way to compare the two. Two is we have these numbers that are so, they're impressive, but it's pretty clear based on previous UFC events that other UFC events generated many more millions of live audience watchers, people watching at the time, because we have global figures from Brazil at the time. Anderson Silva was fighting. Remember, he was massive in Brazil. And those were in the tens of millions, I think up to 30 million or so people. So you had that 30 million with the US audience and European. That kind of blows away this UFC Freedom 250. What makes UFC 250 impressive, it was on Paramount, which has a limited number of subscribers. What is it? I can't remember the exact number. Also, I thought was worth looking at is is that the social media reach that they talk about is one of the most absurd numbers ever, because it's not actual impressions. It's not people seeing it. They've added up the reach that they have, right? The reach in the sense that the number of people potentially could see it. And so it's almost just a generic bogus number. I'm not sure whoever buys this stuff, but having talked to a lot of people that work in the industry, that deal with the executives at company, that deal with the wealthiest people that invest in this, I am somewhat also shocked at how dumb these people apparently are, that how little scrutiny they give the information they're given, how little research they do, and they buy a good narrative and fully commit to it. And I think in some ways this is what the UFC did here, is they built this model, and we've talked about before, it almost seems intentionally that they went for metrics that could not be compared to the MVP event, because whatever personal reasons, they do not want to look like they did worse than MVP that they got beat. So they found these metrics, and then on top of it, they built up a model, a bunch of data that shows this incredible performance. And I'm not going to say they did bad. It actually looks like on the surface that it actually did generate a ton of traffic compared to most events. It looks like it was in many ways very successful, but they had to come up with the most ridiculous version of it, because I think they wanted to go out and then sell people who are not going to, perhaps, who are just going to on a whim invest in, space on their cage or whatever, or international markets that want the UFC to come. They wanted to make as massive as possible. So that's what my take is. My take is, basically this was, on all measurements, on any honest measurement, you'd probably say it did very well. It had a large audience, but on the way they oversold what the numbers would be, on the way that they now kind of package the numbers, it is not nearly as impressive as I think they try to make it out to be.
So you actually agreed with me what I said in the beginning then, which was that I buy into the 34 million number, but I don't buy into 126 billion social views. Now let me read you something. The 2026 Apple Music Super Bowl halftime show set a record of social media views, hitting over 4 billion social media views within the first 24 hours of release. You are telling me that the UFC did like multiple times over the Super Bowl halftime show, which happened to be the most watched halftime show of any Super Bowl ever. You're telling me that it did multiple times over. Yeah,
I'm not telling you that. Joe Rogan's telling you that. Why would he lie?
But when I first said that, I bought the numbers, the 34 million, but I didn't buy 126. You said, no, I buy them both.
No, but again, because the 126 million.
It wasn't million, it's billion. They said billion.
I know. Let me rephrase the 126 billion. Remember what I said. They are not talking about actual impressions. They're talking about the reach. So it's an absurd number they put together that could be based on some reality, but it doesn't mean anything. It means absolutely nothing. What you're saying is all these platforms have this much reach and this many people potentially could have seen it. You combine them. Okay, that's possible that we could be in the billions upon billions upon billions of potential reach, but what number to actually reach people? What people actually saw it and made an impression on it? We're talking about a fraction of a fraction of a fraction at that point. So that's why I believed it, because as ridiculous that number is, it's probably based on some sort of metric they put together, like, YouTube has an audience of whatever, billions of people a week. Well, God, we could say that's the UFC's potential reach is billions on YouTube. Oh, it's billions on Twitter. It's billion, just keep adding up these absurd numbers of possible people that could be hit, that could be reached by it, and then come up with the final number. Okay, all that's theoretically, mathematically possible, probably, but it doesn't mean anything.
But they used this term in their PR release. They said, and I quote from the PR release, best performing UFC event on social media with 126 billion social views. So they actually said they had 126 billion social views. That's their words.
I'm pretty sure in it they mention that this is social reach figures, not actual viewership counts.
there. See, that's so deceitful to me, to make that big bold statement in bold type and then explain it away in the little small print. They're so deceitful.
Yeah, it's when you look at their press release, it does say 126 billion total views, but it says social media amassed 126 total views. But if you go down further, it's 64 billion impressions, and so they start breaking it down, and it's not really views. So it's like I said, it's bogus.
I mean, even the 64 billion is outrageous, considering that the Super Bowl halftime show only did 4 billion, and it broke all the records. And oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. These people are master manipulators. Can I say that?
Yeah, well, they get paid well to do this job. They apparently do a pretty good job of confusing people what they're actually doing, because they have the impressions that I think it's very misleading. Let's just put it that way. It is misleading the way they're representing these figures.
Absolutely.
And the other thing to remember too, what could be inflating it too is, you got to remember it's all the news stories about the UFC at the White House and not just the event that they're probably counting.
Oh, see, that's also deceitful.
Yeah, so it's not the night of the event. They're probably including all the news stories on top of the event itself. So you put that in there as well, and you're going to get there probably was much more coverage about the event at the White House than not the event, but the setting up, the stage there, the possibility was going to be held there, than the event itself.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely can support that argument for it. Yep. I can definitely understand that part, especially when you consider that you're looking at not just days or weeks, you're looking at months of articles and things that they probably co-opted in.
Oh, yeah. Plus, I mean, they probably got, an actual figures in engagements, millions upon millions of engagements, just checking out the lawsuit against them.
Yeah, yeah.
When people are trying to stop it. So.
That's so funny. Oh, they're so manipulative. Anyways, we're gonna go on with one more White House card topic here, and that is Alex Pereira, because he has lost some of his shine over the last few weeks here, especially with the loss to Cyril Gane, who, despite the illegal shots to the back of the head, he was going to beat the crap out of Alex Pereira any which way you slice it. That's the bottom line, and he did. So Alex has lost a bit of shine in that regard, but since then he's been on this. Holy moly, he's been on some kind of run of bad PR. There's been continuing reports with lots more details coming out about sexual assault against his ex-girlfriend. Now, I'm saying reports because we are, not privy to everything that's going on. But there's been a lot of stuff that's been said by his ex-girlfriend. She has a case against him. We'll have to see what the outcome of the case is. But, there's some really disturbing details that have come out from that. There's been this concentrated attack by he and his team against Herb Dean. There's been weird exchanges with fans on social media, and there was a big kerfuffle over photo opportunities that were paid for and not delivered on by Alex due to some kind of misunderstanding with the people that were putting on the event. So, I mean, there's just been so much bad PR surrounding him. So I got to get your take on his antics. And do you think that he should maybe dial back his presence a little bit?
Oh, definitely. I mean, no one likes a whiner, especially when the problem is, even if he's right about the hits the back of the head, and there was someone that had a video breakdown that showed, I think, 2 to 3 clear punches to the back of the head out of 18. Now, that's not because some of them were concealed by blocked by bodies. There might have been more, but it was a handful, number of back punches to the back of the head, which are bad enough. But we follow the sport long enough to know that generally in when there is some sort of finishing sequence or there's a lot of movement in the cage, the refs are pretty lenient. They've always been about some punches to the back of the head when people are flailing about. And so that's, I mean, it doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean that maybe we should enforce it stronger or whatever. But that's always been the case. So to start bitching about it now, just, it strikes people as just poor taste, poor sportsmen. I have to somewhat assume, I kind of think that on top of, because of the allegations, the charges against him, the stress from that, and throw in the fact that as Demetrius Johnson, as Sean O'Malley talked about, as people in the past talked about, when you lose the title, your money goes down, right? As Francis Ngannou said, they offered him a lot of money to stick around. He ended up getting more outside the UFC, but they offered him a much bigger deal in the UFC. But one of his problems was if he lost his fight for whatever reason, if it was just bad judging, cheating by his opponent, whatever, his next fight, the amount would have plummeted. Ronda Rousey, we know from her contract that when she was in a title fight, her last one, not the one with MVP, but her last UFC contract, that she was getting $3 million guaranteed plus pay-per-view points. Well, I believe she lost the pay-per-view and her guaranteed, or she might have kept the pay-per-view, but her guaranteed dropped to $500,000 after that. So it's a massive drop down in your guaranteed income. And the word has been that Alex got around $10 million for this fight. Some people have said publicly about $5 million. I've heard about $10 million. He did say on X to someone, or Instagram, one of them, that someone was kind of mocking him. He says, "I'm too busy worried about splitting up my what I was paid into 50 bank accounts for the insurance." And what that means, that implies, because under FDIC rules, the insurance that the bank provides is up to $250,000. And so what you do when you get a lot of money often is you split it amongst multiple bank accounts, because if something happens, you're insured for that money. You can claim and get your money back. Where if you put over $250,000, which some Silicon Valley banks did, they tons of money, or companies did with Silicon Valley banks, when they went under, they lost their money. So what he's suggesting there is, if it's accurate, 50 banks, I have no reason to believe it is accurate. I actually believe he just came up with a large number. I believe he was talking to someone about a large number, but the 50 seems way too rounded in some way. So it might have been just a number that came to the top of his head, but that would suggest he got $12.5 million for the event. But how much, if he got 5, 10, or 12.5 million, how much is he going to get for his next fight? And, that could explain why he's kind of freaking out about this, because he has just lost an absolute fortune in future fights, but he's not also thinking about how it's losing him fans at the same time, his behavior. And I just want to note one thing. There was at least something amusing came out of it. Remember that video clip of the little kid crying, pointing at the bag, trying to signal to her mom, as they superimposed it on a still from the fight, signaling to his mom as the little kid is pointing to different parts of the head, and she keeps saying no, as if that's not back of the head. That's the one positive that's come out of this. We do have some very entertaining memes, but I somewhat suspect, I could be wrong, but just based on the reaction that other fighters have had when they lost the title, the drop in what they're getting paid that they see, I could see that is playing a big part in his kind of freak out over this, because he is, he's losing it for his next fight. Potentially other future super fights are now out the window because he lost this fight, and he's unwilling to accept that it's a loss on his record. And I think the better tactic would be to point out that I think he could point out that he thinks there strikes the back of the head, but use that as an argument for why he should get a rematch or something instead. Not to go on a journey to get it overturned when there's no chance in hell. The athletic commissions will not overturn this. Better people have tried. They do not give a shit. They circle the wagons. You are not going to win this one.
Especially when it was so clear that Cyril Gane whipped his ass. If you even remove those hits to the back of the head, he still got his ass beat.
I mean, if I remember correctly, because I did watch this fight, if I remember correctly, it was just a smooth jab. It was a straighter. I think it was a jab. Actually, he walked into just a perfect jab that rocked him first, and then caught him after that. And so like the fights, the strikes that put him on absolute queer street were 100% clean.
And they split him open too under his cheek. Like that. That first jab just opened him wide up.
Yeah, that's so, if Brock Lesnar's isn't going to get overturned, because I think his was even, against Frank Mir was a worse example of a fight being stopped for strikes to the back of the head. Because if I just like, how can Brock not hit you in the back of the head? He's got lunch pail.
To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!